you learn something from all these coaches. There's a reason why they're in these positions of power and why they're so influential and successful motivating people. And if you pay close attention, you can pick up some skills and traits and apply it to your own life.
Hello, Dawg Nation, and welcome back to the DawgNation Tell All, the series where we go behind the scenes to talk about all your Dawg Nation favorites, moments, and Georgia things they've gotten to witness with their own eyes. I have to say that this one is one I've been waiting on. Some might say you saved the best for last. It's Mike Griffith. Let me tell you why I'm so excited to have you here with us today. I feel like your background and your journey to Georgia is so different than everybody else that we've gotten to see before you, because you didn't grow up near here. You didn't grow up a Georgia fan. You're a national guy. You've been everywhere. So I just want to say I'm really excited to have you in studio today.
Excited to be in studio.
Yeah, so let's talk about when you get to Athens. You start covering the Dogs. What were some of the early realizations that you made, not only about the program, but also the fan base?
Wow. Well, it didn't take long to realize the passion, especially in Athens. The folks that are around Athens, it's almost like there's different layers of Georgia fans. And I think in Athens it's really intense because they support all the sports, not just football, but you see them at the gymnastics events, the baseball games, the softball games, the basketball games. So there was a little bit more of an intense environment in Athens than I'd experienced coming in as a beat writer from other teams. The town, obviously, believe it or not, it was somewhat new to me because when you come from out of town, you don't get rooms in town. If you're going to be coming from outside the state to cover Georgia, all the Georgia fans are going to get all the hotel rooms in Athens, and they're going to enjoy all the downtown festivities. So usually you're just driving in and out and staying in Atlanta. So that's when I realized just how awesome the town of Athens was, and the restaurants, the pubs, the shops, and being adjacent to campus. So I actually looked for an apartment. I actually lived downtown for 1 year and just really enjoyed and soaked it up. And so that was a lot that I realized was, I guess, just the intensity of the fan base in Athens, and then just how beautiful of a town Athens is.
So we're going to circle back to the beginning days at DawgNation and what it's been like to cover the Georgia Bulldogs, but I want to go back to the very beginning. You grew up in Michigan, is that right?
For the most part. I was born in Alabama, moved to Michigan at an early age.
So who were the teams that you rooted for as a kid?
Oh, wow. Well, I guess it started out watching WGN and the Chicago Cubs. They were losers. So I switched over to the Cincinnati Reds because they were really good. But then football-wise, just the Denver Broncos, those little helmet machines. You put the quarter in and the plastic helmet comes out. Well, that was the helmet that came out, and I liked it. I said, I like these colors. I'm going to be a Denver Broncos fan. So I started watching the NFL, and of course, I followed SEC football. I was born in Alabama, and so I took note of Alabama and Auburn and then the teams that they would play. So Saturday was college football day, and then Sunday I'd be watching the Denver Broncos.
Okay, so let me ask you this then. Do you know that you always wanted to be a journalist, or growing up thinking about like your dream job, what would you have said?
Athlete. I played all the sports, and I had a dream to play pro sports like every other kid. And I guess in high school, the recruiting letters weren't exactly coming from the big name schools, and my grades weren't the best either, if I'm going to be honest about it. I kind of had a lot of fun in high school, didn't take life too serious, and so that's what led me, I guess, to join the military, because here's a way to get college money, figure out what I want to do, and I had a chance to join the 82nd Airborne and be a part of something bigger and better, and learn a lot about motivation and life goals and camaraderie and esprit de corps and things like that really ended up helping me out in my career, because I met people from all over the world, all sorts of different backgrounds, and talked a lot to them when we weren't jumping out of airplanes. We were hanging out, shooting our guns and practicing or marching or running together or playing sports together, and just got to meet a lot of different types of people with different backgrounds, and really enjoyed learning about different people from different places and maybe different philosophies, different ways of looking at life.
Yeah, as someone who has a grandfather that also served time, I remember finding that out about you, and I already had just this tremendous amount of respect, and hearing that, it was cool to find that out. So now, post-military, you went to Michigan State.
I did.
Right?
Yeah.
What do you remember most about the culture around the football program there when you were in school?
There wasn't much of one. I grew up about 12 miles from there in a little small town called Mason, Michigan. It's the county seat. We had a nice fair and all that, but the big city was Lansing. That was the capital city, and it's adjacent to East Lansing, where Michigan State's located. And it's a Big Ten school. It's where everybody, it's where you're supposed to go if you're from there. I didn't have a great passion for Michigan State, though, because I didn't felt like growing up that they took their sports real serious. Especially growing up watching SEC football. It's like, you don't care, I don't care. I'm dialed into the SEC. I was the guy that was always talking SEC sports and like, who is this guy? Why do you care? Well, I was born down there. I'm a part of that SEC area. But it was a really good school, and they had a journalism school. And as it so happened, Kaylee, when I got out of the military, I went and I worked at our mall. We had the Meridian Mall, right? So I was working at an American Eagle, a retail job,
wow.
right? Selling clothes, okay? Different, the housewives and the moms would come in.
These jeans may or may not be that brand.
Maybe, so I'm working back in the shoe section because shoes are a pretty good sale, and we didn't get paid on commission, but they kept track of our dollars per hour sold. And if you had a good dollars per hour sold, you might get that raise from $3.50 an hour to $3.75.
Okay.
So I was aiming for that quarter. Anyway, guy comes in and wants a pair of boots. I said, well, what do you, I'm good sales. What do you need these boots for? Let me make sure I get you in the right kind. He said, well, I'm going to go to the Calgary Olympics. And I said, oh, that's fascinating. What do you do? He said, well, I'm the sports editor of the Lansing State Journal. And I said, is that right? I said, gosh, I've always wanted to do that. And I did. My grandfather worked in advertising at a newspaper, and I walked through a newsroom one time, and somebody called out, some Michigan Panthers transaction that happened 10 seconds ago, and I was like, "That's cool. You know that right now." So it had been in the back of my mind, but it was more like a window opened. And when he said he worked there, I said I've always wanted to do that. And he said, well, are you in school? And at the time, I actually went to a community college the first 2 years, Lansing Community College. I said, yeah, I'm at Lansing Community College. And he said, you look a little older for that. I said, well, I did 3 years in the military. He said, oh, you're a vet. He said, well, here's my business card. Give me a call, and we'll see if we got something for you. So I went in and interviewed, and I would answer phones for about a year when they would call in scores and whatnot. And then eventually I started writing, and that was kind of the start of my journalism career. And I maintained that job at the Meridian Mall. I kept 3 of them. I had a job at the Record Land, the American Eagle, and then I would work nights at the Lansing State Journal doing sports. So somehow I managed 4 nights of men's league softball in there too. I don't know. I guess because we didn't have cell phones. There wasn't cell phones or video games to be distracted by. But I don't remember a lot of free time. But I remember good times.
So when you graduate from Michigan State, what's the job that takes you away from Lansing? Where's the first place you go?
Any job I could get. I literally sent out 200 resumes. No exaggeration. I had probably, 25 or 30 rejection letters. Maybe 175 people didn't even respond. But there were 2 papers that were interested. One was in Winchester, Virginia, and the other one was in Idaho Falls, Idaho. And the Winchester, Virginia job couldn't give me any college sports, but Idaho could. And so I just found out my wife was pregnant at the time.
Firstborn?
Yeah, so Idaho it was, and had never been there, didn't know anything about it. Loaded up the U-Haul and drove across the country. And worked in Idaho for 2 years, covering Idaho State and as their prep athletics coordinator. So I was in charge of 36 different high schools and oversaw that.
Did you have any sort of culture shock when you went to Idaho, or was it kind of similar to Michigan?
No, Idaho's very different, and it was then too. And it's unique because there's a large portion of the population that's Latter-day Saint. And the church is very big in the community. So I'd say probably back then, maybe 65% of the people were part of the Latter-day Saint church, and everything circulated around the church, much like everything circulates around SEC football in the South. I hope that's not too inappropriate of a comparison, but that was different. But people were wonderful. The sports I covered were a little different. I'd never covered rodeo before. The Dodge National Finals Rodeo was there, and geez, what am I going to do other than buy a colorful shirt and no, not a cowboy hat, but they'd say, hey, go down there and stand right next to the chute where that bull's coming out. And from afar, it was like, well, this is no big deal. But then you get up on it and you realize this bull is the size of a car. And this is before they were wearing masks and vests. And this guy was literally taking his life into his hands when this chute would open and that bull would go and things would fly all over. I mean, it was thrilling, and who would have known? It was definitely a fun experience, and enabled me to get my feet wet. And I started to network, Kaylee. I'd always wanted to work in Mobile, Alabama. I was born there. So
shout out to your LinkedIn, I knew that.
So I subscribed to the Sunday Mobile Register. It would come in the mail and arrive on Thursday. And I would read the Mobile Register every Thursday, and then I would call their office on Sunday night. I figured out when the sports editor worked. He worked a Sunday night shift. So I would call Kim Shugart, was his name, and I'd say, Kim, this is Mike Griffith. I'm out in Idaho. And after a while, they knew who I was. I was that guy from Idaho calling, and I'd talk to them about something that was in the paper. Hey, I read this column, or what about that story, or something. And then the end of the conversation, it was always, do you guys have a job opening? And, no, Mike, we don't have one. Well, finally, they did. They didn't, but he said, we don't have one, but there's a job in Anniston, Alabama, which I didn't know where that was, but it's covering Auburn. And this is something you might be interested in. He said, I went to Auburn, and I know the sports editor there. I could make a call, send your work, and I did, and they hired me over the phone, and that got me into the SEC land of gold, covering the 1993 Auburn Tigers, who cooperated wonderfully with an 11-0 season.
Wow.
That was not on television, so they had to read my stories because this team was not on television. So I had a fantastic team to cover. Terry Bowden was a fantastic coach. I worked with a really talented columnist named Jeff Calkins, who a mega star in our profession that made a life for himself in Memphis. And Anniston was well known for award-winning writers and coaching and teaching. And I really benefited greatly from working that job in Idaho to get the door open for a couple of years, and then Anniston, Alabama for a year and a half.
So you brought up Mobile earlier. I know you've got deep ties there because when you and I went to the Reese's Senior Bowl together, I felt like I was with the hometown hero.
Yeah.
When do you get to Mobile?
Well, I was in Anniston for about a year and a half, and of course I continued to network Mobile. And it didn't end up being a newspaper job. They did this project called Street and Smith Sports Weekly. And this was a 48-page color tab that was printed at the USA Today baseball plant here in Atlanta. And my job was a managing editor. So I would oversee all these talented, the best of the best writers in the Southeast were our freelance guys. And back then, we were paying them $600 for a story and $400 for a sidebar. And you can do the translation what that money is in 1994 to 2024. These guys were making bank. So we had the best. And they would write these stories for us after they filed for their papers, whether it was Lexington, Columbia. I think Chip Towers was doing it for Athens. And so I would have this copy come in from the best sports writers in the SEC that I was responsible for copy editing and reading and learning. Like this was a superstar opportunity to learn from these folks. I met Danny Sheridan, former USA Today odds maker. He did a weekly column for us. So more exposure to more big names in the business and more exposure to just incredibly talented writers. So this magazine was fantastic. Everybody loved it. The problem was the distribution. We would fly out the template from the Mobile airport to Atlanta Sunday morning on the first flight. It would get printed, like I said, at the USA Today baseball plant and then mailed out. The problem was we couldn't get it out to all the southeastern cities in time for it to be relevant. So after one season, they said, we're not going to do this anymore. And I said, oh boy, well, what are we going to do? They said, well, what can you do? I said, well, I can write NASCAR. I can do NASCAR. We'll go to the Daytona 500. And the guy said, I don't think the Mobile Register's ever covered the Daytona. I said, well, there you go. It's really popular. You can sell ads to tire dealers, car dealers. He said, well, we'll give it a try. So I did the Daytona event. And then my sports editor was watching me work and watching my writing. And he said, hey, I want you to go up to Tuscaloosa this weekend. Our Alabama beat writer's out of town. We need somebody to cover. Go on up there and cover a couple practices. So I did that. I'll fill in. You know, as far as I was concerned, beat writer days were done. I was ready to wear a tie and go to the office. And he came back, he said, Mike, I think we're going to make you the Alabama beat writer. I said, well, what about Glenn Gilbo, who's like a national writer without kick? We're going to move Glenn to the Auburn beat. I said, well, what about Kim? Well, we're going to move Kim to the South Alabama beat. And the gravity of that was not lost on me. I mean, here I was, 28 years old, covering the biggest beat at the newspaper, Alabama football, and working with Gene Stallings, who is essentially, you know, the Bear Bryant's protege.
Yeah.
And so I would make that commute. I started doing that, and I would make that commute to Tuscaloosa every Monday morning. I would drive 4 hours from Mobile. I'd stay up there Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday night, come back Thursday, drive to the game Saturday, come back Sunday, and start it all over. So that's when I started listening to talk radio. And back then it was Fabulous Sports Babe. So now I started to get an ear for talk radio, which would ultimately also help me out a little bit.
It's crazy to me that within the same decade you cover Auburn and then Alabama.
Right.
One of the biggest rivalries, and maybe not just college football, but all of sports. What was the biggest differences covering those two teams?
Auburn was really proud to have you in their family. You know, they felt like they thought you were in their family. Well, you cover Auburn. You're a war eagle. You're in the family. You know, we're the nice people in the state. You know, you're part of something here at Auburn. You know, and it was warm and people were caring. It was a very a tighter circle, you know, I would say much like Athens with Georgia, you know, and then you cover Alabama, and it's like, well, aren't you a lucky dog? I'll never forget going to the press box the first time, and a couple of my buddies from Birmingham, the big-time writers, Doug Segrist and Ray Millick, pulled me over. Hey, Mike, come on over here. I said, all right. And he said, listen, if you're going to cover Alabama, you need to wear a sports coat to the game. Because around here, the guys that cover Alabama, we wear sports coats. I was like, wow, well, here we go. I'm covering Alabama. I need to get me a sports coat, right? So this was a big deal to cover Alabama. This is a very self-important institution here. And then I guess I'll continue with my Forrest Gump-like travels. The biggest break in my career happens. I'm at an LSU Alabama football game, and I'd brought my wife and at the time 2 daughters, and she was pregnant with my son. And so we brought up the minivan, the little short drive from Mobile to Baton Rouge, and it's going to be a big weekend because they get to use the hotel pool.
Aww.
And yeah, that's a big deal. That's vacation time for them. So I got the minivan, and I'm going down to the lobby, and my columnist says, hey, you need to give these 3 girls a ride to the game. I said, what 3 girls? These 3 girls right over there. I said, Tommy Hicks columns, I don't know these girls. He said, listen, don't be a jerk. The stadium's 5 miles away. Just give them a ride to the game, all right? Okay, I'm feeling a little nervous about this. I don't know these people. They don't know me, but what the heck? So they're all in the back seat, you know, laughing and, you know, interviewing me and asking me all these questions about my family. And yeah, you know, I'm going to have a son, and I'm thinking about naming him after me, but I'm not sure. Might be too much pressure. And the lady says, well, my dad's a junior. It never bothered him. I said, well, that's good to know. I'm going to file that away. So I take him to the game, and without for any further event, it's a fantastic football game. Guy I covered, Sean Alexander, goes for 291. Been writing about the guy for a year and a half. He finally goes off. I'm looking around the box like, hey, I told you this guy's pretty good, right? And I'm thinking this is my big night because, you know, Sean has validated all these stories I've done on him that nobody else was writing because he wasn't playing much. So it's about a month and a half, 2 months later, and I'm in an Alabama basketball game. And a guy by the name of Kirk McNair, who's still there, calls me over. He said, Mike, he said, you need to go talk to that guy right over there. He's been asking about you. And I said, well, who's that? He said, just go introduce yourself. I look over, and this guy's got these thick bottle glasses and this plaid shirt on and his hat on. I'm like, well, this has got to be just some fan. How you doing? I'm Mike Griffith. Kirk said you wanted to talk to me. He said, yes, sir. He said, I wanted to thank you for giving my daughter a ride to the game at LSU. I said, well, it's no problem, seriously. I had no big deal. He goes, here's my business card. If you need anything, call me. Paul Bryant Jr. That was Bear Bryant's granddaughter who I had given a ride to at the game. And I did call Paul Bryant Jr. And all of a sudden, I started to break a lot of stories.
Wow.
And the coaching staff treated me a lot differently. So there was quite the break in my career, which I could go into several other stories that the sports information people probably wouldn't want me to go into, but the break in my career. So a lot of news started coming out of Mobile, and Mr. Bryant didn't do anything crazy or like that. He was just a guy that knew what was going on because Paul Bryant Jr. is Alabama, and fate had happened, and I was fortunate.
So it seems like you think really highly of your time there, but you spent the majority of your career in Knoxville. What gets you there? Well,
so they wanted to hire me for NASCAR because I was doing when it wasn't football, I'd go cover NASCAR events because they did figure out they could make money on the advertising, and I was pretty good at the NASCAR coverage. I'd gotten in the garage area, and back when everybody wanted to talk to Dale Earnhardt, nobody wanted to talk to this new guy, Jeff Gordon. I did because it was different than everybody else, and Jeff was really cool. So I'm like, I'm going to write about Jeff Gordon. Anyway, I had a pretty good in the NASCAR tracks. I said, listen, I'm not leaving the Alabama beat to go cover NASCAR. That's not going to happen. I need a football job. And the guy said, well, we've got a really good football writer, and this is a destination paper, Mike. Nobody leaves the Knoxville News Sentinel. Well, then fate happened again. The Houston Oilers became the Tennessee Titans. And the guy who used to have the lead radio job in town Mike Keith, went to become the Tennessee Titans announcer, which led to the Tennessee football beat writer taking the best writing job in town. And suddenly, there was the Tennessee football beat. And they call me back and say, all right, we'll give you the Tennessee football beat and NASCAR. And you don't have to drive 4 hours to work every day. You get to live right here in Knoxville. And that was 1998. And so I went up there and everybody said, boy, glad you're here, but you really missed the parade. Peyton Manning just left, Mike. I said, oh,
wow.
no. I guess I'll have to suffer with T. Martin winning the 1998 National Championship on my first year on the beat. So that worked out pretty well.
So you come in at a really good time when they're really successful. How were things different when you left there?
Well, in 2005, they came to me and they said, listen, you've done a great job with football. Fantastic. But there's this new coach coming to town, and we really want to beef up our basketball coverage. And I said, listen, man, I didn't come here to cover basketball. I'm an SEC football writer. They said, well, now you'll still go to the games. You'll just cover the other team locker room, and you can do some really creative things out there, but we need you to be the basketball beat writer. I did not want to do it. They said, well, Bruce Pearl's waiting to meet you in the gym. I said, I don't know who this guy is, but whatever. So I met Coach Pearl, and he said, well, it's just an honor. It's such an honor to have a football beat writer covering basketball. This is the way it should be. Come with me. I'm just thinking this is like the worst day of my life because I do not want to cover Tennessee basketball. Not at all. It'd been so bad, and nobody cared. And so this Bruce Pearl guy, he's really going to make a difference. Well, let me tell you, he made a huge difference. Every practice with Bruce Pearl was open for me, every single one. Now, other people could have gone, they didn't go. I went to every practice. When the team went to the Czech Republic, I was on the team bus. I was in the city walking the streets with the players. I mean, it was complete all access. I'm sitting at the hotel bar listening to the Tennessee coaches tell jokes about the Vanderbilt coaches. What's going on here?
In covering Bruce Pearl, he's a guy that lives out loud. I think people remember when he took his shirt off and painted his chest at a Pat Summitt game. I think they remember his pep rallies, telling everybody before the 1-2 Memphis game, going into a booster rally and saying they're going to kick their ass, before the game. You're not supposed to say that, coach, but he says it, and then they beat the number 1 team when they're number 2. I think I really learned from Bruce, to kind of live out loud and really be true to yourself, and don't worry about trying to do things a certain way. He certainly doesn't. So then when they came to me with the charitable ask of taking part in the Knoxville Dancing with the Stars, which was the last thing on earth I would ever think I would do, I realized that everybody thought that was the last thing I would do. So I went ahead and did that, and that was a lot of fun. But it was just one of the examples. When you cover these coaches, Kaylee, whether it's Terry Bowden, whether it's Gene Stallings, whether it's Kirby Smart, whether it's Mike White, you learn something from all these coaches. There's a reason why they're in these positions of power and why they're so influential and successful, motivating people. And if you pay close attention, you can pick up some skills and traits and apply it to your own life. And I think those 6 years covering Tennessee basketball, probably the most fun that I had.
So we're going to get to the present. I know you spent time at SEC country, but I want to focus on when you came over to DawgNation. Could you have ever imagined when you made that switch to DawgNation that they would have so much success in such a short amount of time?
Well, they were already successful. The DawgNation was the flagship brand. I mean, that was the go-to spot for all the Georgia fans. It had the most amount of traffic. It, certainly, Brandon Adams had launched that podcast. It was incredibly popular. Jeff was, regarded as, the best recruiting writer in the Southeast. And everything that I'd ever known about Georgia, whether I came here as an Alabama writer or as an Auburn writer, as a Tennessee writer, I'd always had a great experience. The fan base exudes class. And I didn't really understand all those dynamics of what made this trip to Sanford Stadium so special, or Stegman Coliseum so special. Every time I would come, it was a great experience. And there was just a certain, every school has a feel, right? Like you asked me about the Tennessee folks, or we could talk about the Florida folks, but Georgia, it was always class.
So as you mentioned before, in the early days, UGA did have a few top 10 finishes, but what was that moment or game that you witnessed where you thought to yourself, they're a true national championship contender. They can really pull this whole thing out?
Well, at the time, I didn't know that they were. Mm-hmm. What I knew was my experiences with Coach Richt. So, for example, this is just an example of Georgia class. So, in 2007, I've been involved in this football writers organization, right? In 2007, I was named the Football Writers of America president, which I thought was a pretty big deal. But
Nice little thing to have on your
most
resume.
people probably don't even know it exists. But I get to go to the Hall of Fame and introduce Claude into the Hall of Fame. He won some award that year, and speak on the stage at the back when it was in South Bend, and present the Gursky Trophy in Charlotte. This is pretty cool. I get a letter in the mail congratulating me on being the Football Writers President, and it's signed by Mark Richt. Nobody else wrote me a letter, but I got a letter from, I don't even cover Georgia. I have no relation to Georgia. But Mark Richt has written me a letter on Georgia Stationery congratulating me on my achievement. And so this Mark Richt guy, I start to follow and get to know and talk about class, right? And then Kirby Smart comes in, and the first year was kind of rough, but, you just knew there would be fireworks. Kirby was such a fiery guy. This is a place that something's going to happen. I don't know what it is, but that guy over there is combustible. Kirby looks like he's going to explode every game. Selfishly, this Atlanta market, this is the major leagues. If you're covering college football, it gets no bigger than Atlanta. If you're going to work for a media company, it gets no better than Cox Enterprises. So all the stars are lining up. My experiences with Georgia are good. I call Claude Felton. I say, Claude, do you think I'd like it? He said, well, we'd like it here, Mike. That's good enough for me. So that was hammered down. It wasn't about the championships. It was about the experiences and the adventure that was ahead with all these promising things in place.
I'm glad you bring up Kirby, because as someone who's been around legendary coaches and seen the rise and fall, where does Kirby really rank on this greatest of all time college coaches list?
It's too early. Kirby's Kirby. Kirby, and all coaches are different. Now, I will say when I covered Mark D'Antonio at Michigan State, he was a former Nick Saban defensive back assistant. So a lot of the things that I heard at Michigan State from Mark D'Antonio is the same things we hear from Kirby. There's a certain way of doing things. These are defensive for the most part. Now, I'll throw that out the window this year because Kirby has already declared it's time to let the cat go play. And with all this hype with Carson Beck, if he doesn't throw for 4,500 yards and end up in New York, we'll all be disappointed. So the offense is going to be turned loose. But at that point, Kirby was very similar to Mark D'Antonio in a lot of his philosophies. And it was a little different how Kirby dealt with the media, though. All these other coaches, I had their cell phone numbers. I'd call them up on their way home. And, hey, what happened to this and that? And Kirby said right from the beginning, look, here's what you need to understand. I respect the media and I appreciate the media, but I'm not buddies with the media. He goes, I don't have time for it. It's nothing personal. He said, Mike, I'm here to win a national championship. And every decision I make is based on winning a national championship. Now, if there's a way you can help me win a national championship, that'd be great, but I don't think you can. So his time he's extremely efficient with his time, which is one of his, I don't know if I call it a secret anymore. I think people know that, but Kirby is very careful with how and where he spends his time. And when he had a PR guy like Claude, he didn't really have to worry about the media. There's so many other great people over there that can help the media get information that Kirby doesn't have to hold reporters' hands or be buddies with anybody or, hey, don't write this or do right. He never cares about any of that. He's focused on winning national championships, and that is his direction. So I've run into Kirby plenty of times coming off the Finebaum set. He'll be going on. I'll make a joke like, well, I'm glad you warmed him up for me. It's not, or just shake his hand. Hey, good game last week, and I've written enough things and said enough things on Finebaum. It's funny, not funny. I guess I was a few years in, and they'd ask me about, well, what does Kirby think about this? Or Kirby thinks this, and this is what Kirby wants. And I came up the stage and Claude stand. I said, Claude, I'm realizing I say a lot of things about what Kirby thinks. Does he ever get upset about it? He's like, listen, if you ever get it wrong, he's going to let you know. I said, well, I haven't heard from him yet. So far, so good.
It is no secret that you are a regular guest on the Paul Finebaum Show. The chemistry that you two have is absolutely amazing to me. How did you get in contact with Paul? And is that what it's really like for you guys, even off air?
Well, Paul was a columnist in Birmingham when I worked in the state. And so we knew of each other's work. He was syndicated in the Mobile Register, and so I knew his work, he knew my work. And I guess we kind of got reacquainted right around 2016 when Tennessee football was having some issues, and I would be the guest to come on and say, what's going on at Tennessee? And things got heated a couple times. And for a while there, I was backpedaling and getting body slammed pretty good. And one day I just decided, you know what? I'm not going to let him push me around anymore. When he fires at me, I'm firing back. And there were fireworks, and there was a great response, and I started to come on more often. And then once I got on the Georgia beat, Georgia became very prominent very quickly, and Paul decided he wanted me on every week. The next step was to start a Thursday night slot. So I would have a regular slot every week. The cool thing about this interview is I never know what he's going to ask me. I have no idea. There's nothing pre-recorded or I'm going to ask you this. I tell people it's like an airplane flight. You get on, you hope it's not bumpy, but there's always a chance for turbulence. And so it's basically just two guys going at each other, and it's gotten to the point where sometimes he'll just say, tell me what's going on. And then he'll just start trying to pick things off and come at me. And what's kind of fun about it is covering Georgia, it's not real hard to talk about how great Georgia is. It's like, well, go ahead, Paul, take your shots, because Kirby Smart just keeps winning. And covering Georgia and getting to know Kirby like we do, because we go to his press conferences, it's fun to share that with people. You know, when people say, boy, I bet it's tough in those press conferences when Kirby snaps at y'all. I said, no, man, I don't go to the zoo to watch the lion sleep. I said, I want to see Kirby on the prowl. That is Kirby Smart. Now, Monday, Kirby Smart, you're going to get the corporate look, the loafers, the dress pants, and he's all buttoned up and ready for the week. But Tuesday night, Kirby Smart's, like Darth Vader. The visor's pulled down. You can't see his eyes. He's a little sweaty. He's got that ragged red top on, and he's talking ball, and he's ticked off about something, or he's ready for something else. And to see that turn about in maybe 36 hours is a lot of fun and amazing. But getting back to Finebaum, our off-air conversations are like our on-air conversations. We enjoy sparring with one another. We enjoy, conversations that maybe other people aren't willing to have or willing to go there. I remember BJ telling me one time, you're the guy that says what everybody else is thinking, but really doesn't want to say. And to some extent, that's true.
Yeah.
You got to kind of be careful with those sort of things. But at the same time, why not call out the elephant?
And we're going to do a little something that we like to call Tell a Little.
Oh.
It's a rapid fire segment. I'm going to throw some things your way. It wouldn't be Tell All with me if I didn't make it fun.
Okay.
Come on.
Are you warning me?
No.
I don't know.
This is okay. So everybody's gotten the same first two questions. What's the greatest Georgia sports moment you've witnessed with your own eyes?
The number 1 versus number 1 win over Tennessee.
Yeah, that's a good one. Who's the greatest athlete of all time?
The greatest athlete or football player?
Athlete.
Michael Jordan.
Love that. What's the best college town?
Evans.
Best rivalry in college football?
Alabama.
What current Georgia player will have the most success in the NFL?
Define success. Money, Super Bowls.
Let's go Super Bowls.
Okay. Super Bowl champion Malachi Starks.
Love that. All right. One thing that a lot of people may not know about you, and I was surprised to learn about you, is how in tune you are with new music and new artists. So for everyone that's watching, who is a new artist that they should listen to? You should be proud of yourself.
I don't know new artists that they should. Well, new to me is not new. I still think that.
Like post 2010.
Camille Cabello.
I thought you might say Dua Lipa. I will take that answer. Okay, I guess I don't really know the exact term for it, but you own properties?
I do,
or
yeah.
If you could give everyone at home some advice on real estate or property management, what would it be?
Buy near schools and in a good community.
Who's the best sportscaster in the industry?
Current sportscaster in the industry. Kirk Herbstreit.
I feel like that's a solid choice. What's your favorite non-football event you've ever covered?
Oh boy, there's a lot of them. Non-football event that I've ever covered. Probably, it would either be the Masters. I got to play it the following Monday. Mm-hmm. That adds a little bit to it. I think it was when, during the Olympics, I had a half a day off, and I went to Wimbledon just to see it, and Roger Federer was playing at center court, and I got to sit there and watch Federer play in the Olympics in Wimbledon. That was pretty fantastic.
Last one, because we might have to pull out your phone for this. What's the current Marriott stay night count? Marriott.
Oh man, I don't know. Santel told me that the other day, and it's a lot. It was, I think it's a few years.
What's your membership status called? It's like titanium.
Whatever the highest.
It's the highest loyalty of, and we don't give out just plugs on this show, but just because of the sheer numbers and how impressive it is, we found this out at the Orange Bowl when
I want to say like maybe 1,500 nights or something.
I think it was more than that when we discovered it already, but I just want to say that's one of the most, I mean, you're an impressive guy. Your resume, the way you go about relationships and everything but nothing has impressed me more about you than the nights in the Marriott.
The Marriott system was fantastic, and back then there was a lot of travel, whether it was NASCAR, whether it was Alabama, Tennessee, I guess now Georgia, and I stayed loyal to the brand because of the incentive programs that worked out.
So you've told us all, you've told us a little. Now I want you to tell us something. Leave us with a thought. You can use this as your opportunity to promote yourself, shout someone out.
Wow.
The floor is yours.
Wow. Their desire. You know, I would talk about our DawgNation brand.
So glad you're here with us
And the reason
today,
I would
Mike.
talk about it is because every day it seems like we're coming up with a new project,
4, 3,
like what we're
2,
doing here with
1.
this tell-all. Like I just found out about this 2 weeks ago. Like, hey, this is what we're going to do. I don't know that I've seen anyone do this. I don't know that I saw anyone do a daily video podcast in Dallas and get all of the SEC network stars on like you did. I don't know that I've seen anyone that has nightly content like we do, much less of Brandon Adams that's every day on DawgNation Daily. I guess my concept is, you know, even at this stage of my career, what's exciting and exhilarating is to work with so many creative people. And I've been so many places where they'd say, you know, it would be cool to do this, or if only we could do that. And that's how the conversation starts with us. But then they go, well, let's do it then. And, you know, because of our leadership, our management, and because of the resources we have at Cox Enterprises, we're able to go into different areas of new media that other people have not stepped into yet. And it's exciting to be at the forefront. You know, maybe I'm looked at as the veteran guy, or the, you know, Jeff likes to call me the old grizzle Pete, whatever, Jeff. I'm not that old. But
You look nice for a man of your age.
as you told me, yes, that's the left-handed compliment I was waiting for. I like the idea that I'm still a part of a cutting-edge industry and part of a corporation that has the talent and the means to drive our industry forward and be, you know, trailblazers. Because if you look around, that's not happening in a lot of places. And so I feel pretty blessed. You've heard me talk about my career, right place, right time. I'd say that's still how I feel. I guess that's what I'd leave you with.
So I want to leave with this. When I first came to DawgNation, you were the one person I had heard of you. I had no idea what you were about. I was super, not intimidated, but I just didn't really know what to expect. You are the vet of the group. You've been around this for a long time. So I think I was more nervous to meet you than anyone else. And then the first time that I met you is when we came to Athens and we all had a group lunch. And I just remember how welcoming you were. And I was very surprised by that because it's, you know, most of the times it's the vets in the industry that, not turning you away necessarily, but they got their own thing going on. And
Sure.
You made it a point to introduce yourself, and you've helped me in so many ways, not just on the air and from a journalism perspective, but the networking. And it means so much to me to have this moment with you. And I could have never imagined in a million years not only the professional relationship that we have, but also the friendship that we've built through doing On the Beat together. And
Well,
so I just want to say thank you.
Well, thanks, Kaylee. I mean, I know talent when I see it, and I know enthusiasm. And when you see someone talented with great enthusiasm, it's a rocket ship. And, you know, I'm proud to be associated with you. And, you know, someday later in your career, I'll be proud to say I knew you back when. But, you know, you see a lot of people in our profession that think they want a piece of it. And then when the heat's on and when you're under the scope and under the bright lights and the hours get long, their desire seems to wane a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
You're more like a moth to flame. It seems like the tougher the assignment, the harder you work. You know, obviously, you know, sitting in front of the camera is glamorous, but what people probably don't know is you've carried a lot of cameras and done a lot of work behind the scenes to earn your place. And so I've got a lot of respect for that. So I want people like you to make it because you've earned your way there, and I'm proud to be associated with you.
I'm probably going to need that in writing from you.
Okay,
one day, so
it's on video.
keep
You're on
it-
camera.
Dog Nation, this has been another special edition of the DawgNation Tell All. If you guys want to see someone tell all in the future, please let us know in the comments. And from myself, Mike Griffith, Cody Chavins behind the camera, we thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you on the next DawgNation Tell All.